At Denver's sprawling airport, passenger Kate boards a red-eye flight. The pilot announces delays, but a ghostly attendant serves drinks that taste of ash. Screens show crashes from the past. Turbulence ahead, it warns. Kate deplanes, but her boarding pass now reads deceased, and gates echo her name. The cavernous halls of Denver International Airport hummed with the familiar late-night symphony of rolling suitcases and muffled announcements. It was a place of transitions, of hellos and goodbyes. But for Kate, it felt more like a liminal space suspended between reality and a waking dream. She clutched her boarding pass for Flight 777 to nowhere specific, a red-eye that promised escape from a life she was desperate to leave behind. The gate, C-44, was unusually quiet, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the concourse where the fluorescent lights seemed to flicker with a sickly yellow pulse. Other passengers were sparse, their faces drawn and pale, like faded photographs from another era. They didn't speak, their eyes fixed on some distant, unseen point beyond the tarmac. As she stepped across the threshold of the jet bridge, a chill, unnatural for the climate-controlled terminal, snaked up her spine. The air inside the aircraft was stale and cold, carrying a faint, metallic scent like old blood and ozone. Kate found her seat, 13F, by a window that looked out onto the inky blackness of the Colorado night. The plane was an older model, the seats worn, the plastic trim yellowed with age. It felt less like a modern airliner and more like a museum piece, preserved in time. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, not with the usual cheerful authority, but with a weary, hollow tone that seemed to drift from a great distance. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice laced with static. "We're experiencing some unforeseen atmospheric disturbances. There will be a slight delay before our departure into the ether." Ether. The word hung in the cabin's dead air, unsettling and strange. No one else seemed to notice, their gazes remaining vacant, their bodies unnervingly still. A flight attendant began moving down the aisle. She was tall and slender, her movements unnaturally fluid, almost as if she were gliding rather than walking. Her uniform was immaculate but dated, a style from the 1970s, complete with a pillbox hat perched atop her perfectly coiffed ash-blonde hair. A name tag read Eleanor, but her face was a porcelain mask, her smile painted on and utterly devoid of warmth. When she reached Kate's row, she leaned in, her voice a low whisper that didn't seem to come from her lips. "Something to drink before we ascend?" she offered. Kate, unnerved, asked for a simple glass of water. Eleanor returned a moment later, a plastic cup in her hand. The water was lukewarm and tasted faintly of smoke and cinders, a bitter, ashen flavor that coated Kate's tongue and made her stomach churn. She set the cup down, her hand trembling. Looking around, she saw other passengers sipping their own drinks, their expressions unchanging, as if the foul taste was a normal, expected part of the service. The small screens on the seatbacks, which had been dark, flickered to life. But instead of the usual safety demonstration or in-flight entertainment menu, they displayed a horrifying montage of aviation disasters. Grainy, black and white footage of a Zeppelin consumed by flames. The twisted, smoldering wreckage of a propeller plane in a fog-shrouded field. A modern jetliner cartwheeling across a runway in a fiery explosion. Each clip was silent, yet the images screamed. Underneath the ghastly slideshow, a single line of text scrolled in a stark, blocky font. "Turbulence ahead. Fasten your seatbelts for the final descent." Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a delay, it was a threat. She fumbled with her seatbelt, but the buckle wouldn't catch. It was cold and slick, refusing to lock into place. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of her consciousness. She had to get off this plane. With a surge of adrenaline, Kate scrambled out of her seat, ignoring the silent, judging stare from Eleanor, who stood motionless at the front of the cabin. She stumbled down the aisle, her feet feeling heavy, as if she were wading through mud. The other passengers didn't move, their heads remaining fixed forward as she passed. They were like statues, an audience waiting for a tragedy to unfold. She burst back through the door and onto the jet bridge, gasping for the sterile, familiar air of the terminal. The sudden silence was deafening. She ran, her footsteps echoing unnaturally in the now empty concourse. Gate C-44 was deserted, the desk vacant, the flight information screen ominously blank. It was as if Flight 777 had never existed. Panting, she leaned against a pillar, trying to catch her breath and make sense of what had just happened. Was it a hallucination, a stress-induced nightmare? She looked down at the boarding pass still clutched in her hand. The paper felt different, brittle and aged, like a historical document. The flight number, her seat assignment, the destination, it was all there. But her name, Kate Miller, had been crossed out. In its place, written in what looked like faded reddish-brown ink, was a single chilling word: deceased. A wave of nausea and terror washed over her. It was then that she heard it. A disembodied voice, a synthesized, emotionless echo reverberating through the vast, empty terminal from an unseen public address system. It wasn't an announcement for a final boarding call or a lost passenger. It was a lament, a spectral roll call, and over again through the static and the hum of the building, the gates echoed her name.